Sanatana Dharma, The Eternal Natural Way by Sri Acharya, promises a comprehensive and accessible introduction to the world's oldest religion that still has several adherents today. I was motivated to read this after a couple of years of hearing Sri Acharya speak on the Dharma Manifesto channel, which I've linked to below. After going through this well-organized text, I believe the Vedic perspective presents a stronger metaphysical case than many of its Abrahamic contemporaries, and I commend the author for presenting this rich worldview effectively. In this video, I'll first discuss two compelling features of the Vedic worldview: the notion of Svadharma, which I classify as dispositional ethics, and that of Panentheism, as metaphysically distinct from pantheism. Next, I will describe two concerns of the Vedic perspective, as I understood, regarding some of the Yamas, or proscriptions, apparently advocated by the Vedas. Let us begin with Svadharma, which I called dispositional ethics, for reasons that will become clear in a moment. The Vedic perspective, similar to many pre-Abrahamic religions, considered man to be a differentiated creature, not a mutually substitutable unit. Each individual comprises a unique configuration of three psychological qualities: sattva, rajas, and tamas, which could be crudely classified as intellectuality, passion, and lethargy, respectively. The distribution of these qualities varies among humans, as is evident in any human society. How one's qualities are uniquely distributed determines one's character and disposition. This, in turn, informs one's optimal social position. For example, someone with an abundance of rajas, or passion and dynamism, is better suited for war relative to those more abundant in intellectuality or lethargy. The unique distribution of qualities in a human can be considered a psychological, dispositional, or even spiritual, if you prefer, fingerprint of sorts. This unique combination of dispositional qualities that comprise your individuality also determines your relationship with the divine, which is what Svadharma, or one's personal duty, means. It is the unique configuration of man's qualities, his dispositions, that informs how he best serves God, the source, the absolute. The concept of Svadharma correctly acknowledges the individuated and manifest nature of man and his path towards the transcendent. Each generation and context brings to bear new social and ecological considerations, which influences man's actions in unpredictable ways. The luxury of virtues afforded by civilization can topple at any given moment. A foundation of Svadharma offers firm ontological grounds to stand on in an ever-changing world. Man is to discover his own path to the absolute, derived from the unique disposition provided to him from that absolute. In modernist terms, it is man's disposition that determines his ethical duties. To appreciate the social ramifications of dispositional ethics versus ordained ethics, as per the Abrahamic or modernist religions, one simply needs to glance at the motivations and conduct of recorded conflicts over recorded millennia. Before Abrahamism became culturally dominant, empires were justified on their own terms, and the gods of the conquered were typically assimilated among the greater civilizations, as had been for ancient Egypt and Rome. Different peoples in different geographies would understandably worship different gods, but it was commonly understood these remained reference to the same transcendent plane. By acknowledging the existence of warlike dispositions for some, as Svadharma does, the activities and brutalities of war were generally constrained to those for whom conflict served a means to transcend. In contrast, the global conflicts Abrahamists have been associated with after achieving cultural dominance have been justified, whether honestly or not, on the basis of a wanting and jealous deity who seemingly encourages the conversion, murder, or subjugation of so-called heretics. The past millennia provide sufficient historical evidence that belief in an exclusive, ordained ethical system is an effective scapegoat for senseless and sentiment-motivated conflict. Anyway, returning to the topic at hand, I next want to discuss panentheism. I had not encountered the term panentheism before, but its description neatly accords with my own sense of the absolute. In contrast to the more commonly known pantheism, where all aspects of the cosmos are considered interchangeably divine, panentheism holds that the cosmos is an expression of a transcendent divine. This distinction is key. Whereas the pantheistic view holds both the rock and the goat to be equally divine, this is in stark contrast when considering our interactions with actual rocks and goats. The absolute, by nature, is unitary, but nature, as experienced, is differentiated. So, from a panentheistic view, the transcendental cause of rocks and goats is unitary, while their differences appear in material effect. And because the transcendental cause is unitary, the panentheistic viewpoint is metaphysically monotheistic. Note that this is not the anthropomorphic monotheism of mainstream Abrahamists, who posit a jealous and wanting God who can be bargained and reasoned with, but a wanting God is a limited God. That which wants implies something that is missing, and the metaphysical God, the source as properly understood, is beyond limitation, want, even reason. Note that by mainstream Abrahamists, I want to distinguish the Gnostic sects who, while technically Christian and therefore Abrahamic, nonetheless posited an ultimate divinity, not too dissimilar from Brahma. Just as in Vedic cosmogony, where Brahma is the source of all things, the Gnostics believed the pleroma, or the monad, as the source of the authentic universe. Of course, there are several important differences between Vedic and Gnostic views, but there are interesting similarities there as well, which I may cover in a different video. For now, the overlap between these perspectives in the attribution of absolute divinity to a source beyond anthropomorphic limitations is all I wish to acknowledge. The concepts of Svadharma and Panentheism, as I've understood them, are two strengths of Sanatana Dharma, and are coherent with an eternal natural path. They appear internally and metaphysically coherent, and are among the Veda's most alluring aspects. I premised this discussion with two strengths of the Vedic perspective to convey my appreciation of the view. I agree with several of the Vedic prescriptions which I believe can be argued to be eternally applicable. Yet, some of the Vedic proscriptions, otherwise called Yamas, is what I find inconsistent with claims of an eternal way. Before proceeding to my argument, let me clarify this prior. Sanatana Dharma literally means the eternal natural way, according to Sri Acharya. This is evident both from the lack of a single historical founder and the simple fact of its longevity. The earliest Vedic text, the collection of hymns known as the Rig Veda, has been alleged by traditional Vedic scholars to predate the earliest Abrahamic texts by a few thousand years, making it the oldest living religion. Taking these claims at face value, we can surmise that the principles of Sanatana Dharma should be timeless and applicable eternally. Keep this in mind as we progress. Let us examine two of the eternal proscriptions, or Yamas, which form part of the 10 codes of Sanatana Dharma. A core, if not the primary, proscription is ahimsa, or non-violence. On the one hand, I think many would agree that non-violent resolutions are generally preferable to non-consensual violence in several scenarios. Yet, elevating non-violence from a conditional preference to an eternally applicable mandate fundamentally contradicts the central themes of the Bhagavad Gita and manifest nature. For those unfamiliar with the Gita, the core dialogue involves a discussion between Lord Krishna, the manifestation of the divine at the time, and Arjuna, a powerful human king. The scene commences with Arjuna expressing hesitation before going out to battle. He sees several members of his family and his friends on the other side, and is weighed by feelings of compassion and guilt. He wants to run away, to avoid the battle, to appease what many today might classify as his humanitarian instincts. Yet, through a series of parables and visions, Lord Krishna reveals to Arjuna the transcendent higher good to which man, with his limited perception and knowledge, is simply not privy. Arjuna is compelled to transcend his weakness and reluctance and put to sword even members of his own kin for the sake of this higher cosmic order through a pure spiritual detachment. It is not tenable that an entire scripture premised on an elegant defense of honorific violence would paradoxically advocate absolute nonviolence as an eternal or primary virtue. Beyond contradicting the Gita, the so-called principle of nonviolence directly contradicts how Mother Nature raises her children. Any honest observer of the natural world sees that hierarchy and violence are universal, integral, and necessary features of material existence. In any healthy ecology, the predator acts upon its prey as a manifestation of its intrinsic nature and its position within the cosmic order. As for the extent to which such acts are motivated by sentiments, whether malice or kindness or even detachment, is a different topic altogether. Sentiments are contextual and conditional, and cannot serve as the basis for any principle claiming eternal applicability. Beyond nonviolence, this criticism of conditional applicability could be extended to the remaining proscriptions as well. It is not difficult to imagine, for example, scenarios where upholding the proscriptions of non-attachment and non-stealing are times not the optimal moral choices. Attachment to one's kin and material appropriation from tyrants have formed the basis of many extraordinary, even transcendental achievements in history. In contrast, I am not aware of any mythological or material histories glorifying absolute nonviolence, non-attachment, or non-stealing as the optimal moral choice in every conceivable context, and it only takes a single exception to disavow any claims of eternal applicability. This conditionality extends beyond nonviolence. Let us move on to the second Vedic proscription I want to discuss, brahmacharya, or godly conduct. The question is, how do we conceptualize God? As Brahma, the source, the monad, the absolute. These terms suggest a plane beyond language and rationality, which are expressions of limited human symbolism. Qualities of omnipresence and ineffability, as some examples of divine qualities, are impossible for flesh and blood creatures bound to locality and death to comprehend. The source, by nature, is beyond personality or attributions. Thereby, to engage in godly conduct, one must first orient towards a divine expression with a personality that aligns with his own. One can be a devotee of Krishna or Kalima or of Agni or Indra, with each path associated with its own particularities. Now, it's important to note that these paths cannot contradict with one another, since, according to Sanatana Dharma, they arrive at the same transcendental plane. Thus, the conventional path towards transcendence through practicing lacto-vegetarianism and sobriety strive to reach the same destination as those following the so-called left-hand path of certain schools of Tantra, where meat consumption and intoxication from a purely detached standpoint is a sacred practice. In either case, what counts as godly conduct varies substantively along the material plane. More examples could be drawn for the remaining yamas, but I believe these adequately illustrate the inherent conditionality of the proscriptions alleged to be eternal. They may be eternally proscribed for individuals of certain dispositions, but the latter are conditional to time and place. In closing, I wish to acknowledge that the so-called left or right-hand paths discussed earlier are disposition-specific. They are not meant to be trodden by the majority of humans. Most humans on this earth are occupied with situational, sentimental, and material matters. They typically prefer simplified rituals and edicts. On that level of discourse, I can understand, even condone, the encouragement of proscriptions, such as lacto-vegetarianism and sobriety. But when speaking of the eternal, natural way, where the unity of opposites precludes any moralistic proscription, then those possessing dispositions aligning towards the eternal can similarly transcend said proscriptions as they best see fit. To paraphrase Kumaraswamy, a happy man is one who realizes the path God laid out for him. An unhappy man is one who ever believed he had a choice. Thanks for listening. Until next time.